Welcome to video 2 of Prepco's series on how to launch a startup. The last time we spoke about how to validate your startup idea and find your first few customers. Now let's look at how to go about building your product. We're still in conversation with Ishwar, the founder of Unsolved.network. Now it's tempting to go all out to build your product. This is your baby after all. You want to show the world a polished, classy website and app. It needs to look like Airbnb's site, and the app must be as fast and responsive as Uber's. Otherwise, how will we impress clients? Actually, not really. Right now, your focus is to solve a problem for the customer. So you don't need the perfect interface and the perfect looking product. Of course, we're talking online services like e-commerce stores and B2B services, SaaS services. If you're talking physical manufacturing, right now would be the best time to actually get a few samples made. Even if they cost you more, just do small batches.
But let's say if my idea is that I want to enable doctors to have their clinics online, I don't necessarily need to build a video calling app with appointment functionality and payment functionality. I don't have to do all of that. I can just give an interface where someone books an appointment with a doctor, right? Then I send them a Zoom link, right? And then I give them a payment link, right? And all of that can be kind of manual to test it out rather than, a perfect product to launch.
This also depends on what space you're trying to enter. Is it already an established space or a brand new area with very little competition? So it depends on your MVP, your minimum viable product.
So there are two ways I think of MVPs. It depends really on your competition, right? So if you're in a new space, like a blue ocean space, then you can get away with a lot less. It's like saying, "Hey, I'm going to give you better email," right? And that's what Hate tried to do. But that means their MVP needs to at least be like Google, right? So that means that they take 2 years to build that up. But if you're going and saying, let's say Airbnb itself, right? When they launched, they had a really sad looking, crappy website, but they were not compared or they were not pitching against some hotel site and things like that. They were like, you can book a room with some guy who lives in some place, right? This is what we do. Why don't you try it out? So because that space didn't have anything else, you can get away with a lot less.
This will also drastically reduce the money you need to start up with and not force you to go to a VC early on. A very general, very simplified thumb rule is the later you try to raise money, the lesser the equity you'll have to give up for the same amount of money. Also, rather than building a website or app from scratch, use templates for ready-made apps. You could try app template sites such as AppDupe or Techmanic, or a minimalistic web app generator like Webflow or Bubble. Once you've got this running and have some paying customers, that's when you invest in a proper website. Alongside the MVP, this is also a great time to figure out your product positioning. Basically, where your product or service stands with respect to the competition, everyone else in the market right now. Now, this will both help you define your product strategy in the coming future and also help you explain your product to your customer. Now, positioning is a large enough topic in itself, so we're going to drop links for some interesting books and articles in the description for this video. Don't skip this step though, because it will also help you with that one thing you need to approach customers and VCs, the elevator pitch. Basically, you need to be able to describe what you're building in a few sentences. The elevator pitch is extremely important. If you can't explain your idea in a few sentences, then your customers and potential funders just won't understand your product.
Most people think elevator pitch is for VCs, but actually, if I tell you what I'm doing and you can't tell someone else, "Hey, this is an interesting startup, this is what they do," right? If you can't say that in one sentence, then how will I ever get referred? which is why the positioning or that one line statement is so important. And of course, it's the same thing even within a VC, right? You may get a meeting with a associate or an analyst, right? You may send across a deck. Now they have an internal meeting where they have to pitch you internally, right? And so everyone will say, what are the interesting startups that you met this week? And then they would go and try to explain your startup. If you have not made it easy for them to explain your startup, and if they have to take one paragraph or more, and people are, what do they do? They're not able to get it, right? So a lot of people think, oh, this AI, personalization, throw in some ML, throw in some VR, right? And actually investors, they hate it, because I'm like, yeah, fine, I get there is tech behind it, right? You can tell me you're a tech business, that's good. But what do you do in the first place? After that, only once there is interest in what you do, does it matter how do you do it?
Another good way to look at this could be, you should be able to pitch and demo your product to your customer or an investor in 10 to 15 minutes. Now let's come to what should actually be the most important question in your mind. What's the business model? Where is the money coming from? And one question many startups grapple with, in fact very early on, is, should we try to make money on every unit? Or should we discount or even give the product away free? Because growth is the most important thing right now. This is a tricky one. Everyone tells you that you need a strong business model. But WhatsApp hardly made any money before being sold for $19 billion, and the product is still free. Paytm spent 6,000 crores last year to earn a total revenue of 3,000 crores. Flipkart will make a profit we don't know when, and Snapdeal, well, let's not even talk about Snapdeal. So why even bother with a business model, right? Shouldn't we just raise money and grow at all costs and try to be the next Uber?
The bet that people are taking, right, is that they're saying that you have to become there is an opportunity to build a monster in this space. To build a monster in this space, you have to invest a lot. You have to be willing to handle losses a lot, because you want to be the cheapest player in this space. Like, let's say if, there's no way another e-commerce player is launching right now. Right? Attempting to even take on a Flipkart or an Amazon. That's not really going to happen. The thing is that as soon as there's something which is a success, there are a lot of competitors that sprout. So, and they try to grab market share from you, and you as a high growth startup want to escape competition. So if you want to escape competition, it typically means you are going to have losses for a really, really long period of time. And it seems like there's no escaping these losses until at one point in time they figure out, because of this market dominance, somewhere there they've turned on a revenue model which is now great. So basically, you need a revenue model, and a solid one. But you might be willing to forego it temporarily to grow fast. You might give your SaaS product free to the first 100 customers and bleed money right now to get the word out there, get people habituated to using your solution, and get word of mouth. But that still means that you have a strong potential revenue model. Having said that, don't be the guy who enters an already crowded market space, such as e-commerce, and thinks that he can compete purely on price. If your elevator pitch is that you can sell unbranded shoes cheaper than Amazon, you're probably not going to last very long. Again, when they're asking you for a revenue model, they're asking you that, have you thought about it? How will you eventually make money? It doesn't necessarily mean that you turn it on from day one. So how important is it to collaborate with others? Should you work alone, or immediately start discussing your idea with people you trust? Well, let's listen to a great man who has nothing to do with startups, but maybe he still has some relevant advice on collaboration.
Did you each need each other's approval to know it was good, or did you know it was good yourself, do you think?
Yeah, even though you knew it was good yourself, you needed each other's approval. Not only each other's, we needed George and Ringo's approval too, because in the Beatles, any of them could veto it.
Yeah.
You know, if Ringo didn't like any song we brought in, he'd go, I don't like that, and we wouldn't do it. I must say that I don't think that ever happened, but he had that right. So we all had to be pleased with it. You know, I always think that was one of the good things about the Beatles, that 4 people had to sign off on it. Actually 5 with George Martin. And his 5 good heads had to like this song before the public even got to hear it. Which is actually quite a nice quality control if you think about it, you know.
And actually that's one feedback for founders. They actually work on solo mode for too long. So there's just too much solo mode happening. They get into their own shells, they're working on it themselves, they're not really looking for outside help. You know, and if you move out of solo mode, you typically tend to reap better benefits, right? Because then you're starting to see things from someone else's lens rather than just yours. But I think the most progress that I have had personally when discussing my own startup is just to find that network of people who are also entrepreneurs, who are also startup guys, who are thinking well and probably have raised some money, and then you kind of bounce your positioning off them saying, this is what I'm building, this is what I'm doing, and then they'll come back saying, this is interesting, but if you position it like this, it will help you.
And one trap entrepreneurs fall into a lot is, I need to protect my idea. Someone might steal it. Also because we feel that the people we reach out to are either in the startup space already or people in the same industry. So they're potentially the first people who might just steal my idea and start working on it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I try and compare this. If you have to steal a painting, are you going to steal this or are you going to steal the Mona Lisa? Right? So, or let's say forget this, still a finished piece. You know, here I am telling you I'm going to draw this awesome thing, right? Do you want to, like, this is how I'm envisioning it. Are you going to steal that? So I'm just saying people will steal, but they will steal valuable things. Like Flipkart copied Amazon, for example, right? Ola would have been inspired by Uber. Most of the time, people are looking for what succeeded in the US that I can bring here. Some of the reverse is starting to happen. What succeeded in India? People are looking at China and trying to figure out. Copycats are everywhere. People do steal, but they only steal things that are already proven valuable. And typically, idea stage on if it is genuinely new to the world idea with no other comparables, right? It is almost always going to face the problem of adoption, where you will tell someone about it and they will say, yeah, okay, whatever, right? So in fact, getting people to listen to you becomes the biggest challenge. At idea stage, you think people are going to steal. Then you build a product, you build your website, and then you're like, hear me, I have this awesome thing, and then nobody cares. So then I know this is true for a lot of founders, and obviously dealt with quite a few of them, and they are scared about it. Because they feel that there's going to just be one idea. Right now, after doing this for as long as I have, I can go through a laundry list of ideas and problems that you have identified, right? And if you're just looking, curious, observing, experiencing, and trying questioning everything, you will come up with so many startups and problems and statements that, you know, it's just a question of being able to choose after a point in time, and that will come from what is a good opportunity. Zero to one is like something which is amazing for early stage entrepreneurs. It really talks about the concept of trying to escape competition, for example. The hard thing about hard things, but that's a little more advanced founder where you have to start taking hard decisions and stuff like that, and talks about that.
There's also the Lean Startup by Eric Ries and the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, which specifically focuses on why one founder can't do everything himself or herself. We'll leave links to all these books in the description below. So that's it for this video. In the next one, we'll talk about how to raise funding and discuss how companies can grow rapidly. Stay tuned, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for updates.